You ready? Murder Road by Simone St. James.
Simone. We love a good Simone.
We do love a good Simone. And I had a great time reading this book. The book starts off, and we meet Eddie and April Carter. And this takes place in 1996, somewhere in like Michigan or something like that. And they're in their mid 20s, 26, somewhere around there. And they are newlyweds. They have just gotten married and they are driving to their honeymoon. Okay. Eddie is a former military personnel, Army. Now he works in like an auto shop, and April works at a bowling alley. They are just your most average people in the world. They got no money and just so happy. Eddie's mom had given him up for adoption when he was a baby, and his adoptive family is just the best, just super duper sweet, anything you could ever want. So Eddie was raised in a great household, and he's like just a stud of a guy, right? And April, her upbringing is very rough, very not pleasant, very abusive. Her mom had woken her up in the middle of the night and said, "We have to go." Her mom had just killed her dad.
Well,
and they were on the run, and she changed her identity and her whole life.
April's not really April, or that's not her given name.
Correct. It is not her given name. And she has been cold and hardened. And
how old was she?
12.
Okay. So very much remembers.
Very much, very much. And all she knows, and she just remembers how horrible her childhood was. And then all of her later years, it was just never let anyone in, always run from the cops. You can only trust yourself. Her mom was not nurturing, not loving. And she's never let anyone in, which is why Eddie is so miraculous, because they had like some meet cute or whatever. They met, they started dating, and she told him a lot of truth, but just enough truth so that she had every intention on telling him everything eventually anyways. But they've only dated and engaged and known each other for 6 months, so not very long. And it's a quick one.
As if that's not all of our friends.
Yeah, the state of Utah.
Every single person we know that's now married, besides you guys.
Yeah,
you're the exception.
I felt such pride and be like, yeah, I've known him for years.
We've known each other since we were 14.
I'm not one of you. I'm not 22 years old getting married.
In fact, when our engagement was 6 months, people were like, "You sure you want to wait that long?"
Like, yeah.
Yeah, so
Sinners.
You need to repent. Anyway, she had told Eddie that her mom had died, though. That was the thing. Like, because to her, at this point in her life, her mom is dead. Her mom is actually in prison. We find out a little bit later. This is not super plot point stuff, but she had told, and she didn't tell him that the mom murdered the dad, right? Just that we were on the run. This is my life. She never told him her old name, and he never asked, because at the same time, Eddie, who came up from a great upbringing and whatnot, he was in the Army, and he had seen some stuff, and he was discharged, and he had some PTSD related stuff where he had like some hallucinations and and had just kind of gone through it in wherever war, right? And so their relationship works so well because they have this very solid understanding of, I trust you, like, tell me when you're ready / don't ask, don't tell type of thing. And they love each other fiercely, right? So there's their background, Eddie and April. They're driving, and April wakes up. She had fallen asleep on the drive, and it's dark out, and they're in the middle of nowhere, and they're driving down a road called Atticus Line. And she says, "Oh, Eddie, where are we?" And he goes, "Gosh, I don't know. I'm a little lost, but I know we're headed in the right direction. We're headed in the right direction."
Wait, this book is called Murder Road?
Uh-huh. This is the road. And she says, "Let me get out the map." And he says, "No, I don't need the map. Like, we're headed in the right direction. Let's just keep driving." And as they're driving, on the side of the road up ahead, they see a young girl walking. She can't be more than 18 years old. They see her quite a ways up ahead, and she's walking really slow down this road. And this road is dark. There's not a single car. They're out in the middle of nowhere. There's this girl walking down the road.
You told me when you were during this book, you're like, this book is spooky.
It's spooky. It's a little spooky. Yeah, there's a couple times I was like, "Woo!"
Like,
Well,
now?
this is the open. I mean, this is in the first 5 pages of the book. 10 pages. The background is touched on throughout. I gave it to you all right now. The opening chapter is like, holy dang! You know, it's a little intense. And they're walking, and so Eddie sees this girl walking, and they slow down a little bit. And April rolls down her window and is like, "Hey." Yeah, because it's 96 and they don't have, and they're like a newlywed with no money, right? So they joke about their car and that sort of thing. "Hey, are you okay?" And this girl just keeps walking. She's taking slow steps, doesn't turn and look, nothing. They pull up next to her and they're like, excuse me. And she's wearing this big, oversized like jacket, kind of like it's like a guy's jacket, and she's like a young 18-year-old small girl. And she finally stops and she turns and looks at the car, and she has like this like look on her face of like kind of dazed.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Do you need some help? What's going on?" And she goes, "I'm okay. You guys just need to go. You need to leave." And they're like, Get in the car. We can take you. Where are you going?" And she says, "I shouldn't get in the car. I shouldn't." But they say, "You're not in good shape. Please get in the car." Okay. So she gets in the back of the car, and she's not saying anything, and she's just kind of stunned. And April, so they start driving, and April turns around to like talk to her, and she's just like kind of like really pale and ghostly kind of vibe.
This is freaking me out.
And they notice that she's bleeding.
Oh no.
And they say, "What?" And they open this big jacket of her, and she is just gushing blood.
Oh.
And she had been stabbed a couple of times. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, we need to take you to a hospital right now. Let's go." And she's just kind of, and her name, they ask her what her name is. Her name is Rhonda Jean. Okay. And as they're driving, all of a sudden, in the rearview mirror,
Car
appears some headlights
Oh,
on a road that they haven't seen a car in miles.
Kayla, get over here. We need to see your reaction.
And April and Eddie, they see in the rearview mirror, and Eddie's kind of like he handles business kind of guy, right? Like, and Rhonda Jean says, "He's coming."
Shut up.
Who is coming?
And so Eddie starts speeding
But
up a
how
little
does
bit.
she know? Oh, someone said there's headlights.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Yeah. And then the headlights get bigger and bigger. Eddie is now speeding, and they're racing down Atticus Lane, and they're trying to get to a town called Cold Lake Falls. That's where the nearest hospital is to get Rhonda Jean to this hospital. And they're racing, and they're racing, and they're racing, and they're going, and the truck is right on their bumper, and right at the last minute, Eddie takes the exit to Cold Lake Falls,
Loses him.
and the truck just keeps zooming down Atticus Line. And as the truck zooms down Atticus Line, Eddie looks over at the truck.
There's no driver.
No, there's a driver.
Okay.
And he sees something,
Oh no.
and he gets really weird. And April says, "Are you okay?" And he goes, Yeah, I'm fine. And they get to the hospital.
What?
You'll see.
Cool.
And they get to the hospital, and Rhonda Jean is like covered in blood, and they're like, please help. And they rush Rhonda Jean in, and Rhonda Jean gets into the hospital. And Eddie and April are covered in blood at this point too. And they're just kind of concerned. There's blood all over the car. And as they're sitting there waiting, just kind of for Rhonda Jean, a little while has passed, 20, 30 minutes, a cop and a detective show up. And,
Why? Oh,
and they say, "Are you the ones that just brought in Rhonda Jean?" Like, "Yes." "Oh my gosh, she had been stabbed." And he says, "Well, Rhonda Jean just died in the hospital. And you guys are covered in blood and are the ones that brought her in.
Mm-hmm.
So, what happened?"
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be separated and questioned, and Eddie grabs April as they're getting ready to be questioned and says, "Don't mention the truck."
Why?
Right? And April's like, "What?" And he says, "April, just don't mention the truck." And they get separated and pulled into different rooms. And so they share the exact same story
Okay.
of, we picked up Rhonda Jean on the side of Atticus Line. She was bleeding. She's been stabbed. We brought her into the hospital, right? That's why we're covered in blood. That's why the car is covered in blood. And the detectives, this is where we meet Detective Quinton and the other officer. I forgot his last name, but his first name's Cal. So we'll just call him Cal, Officer Cal. Detective Quinton, he's like the guy in charge, and Cal is just kind of like this like soft-spoken officer. And they're questioning and yada yada. Time goes on, and they say, well, you can't leave Cold Lake Falls. We need you here. We'll put you up in a bed and breakfast for tonight, and we need to further question you first thing in the morning. And they're like, dude, we're on our honeymoon. We're trying to get out of here. And they say, we don't care. Do you know how many people go missing on Atticus Line? And they're like, what are you talking about? Turns out Atticus Line is known for murders and missing people. It is often young women who are hitchhiking to this place called Hunter Beach, which we'll get to in a minute, and they just end up dying and disappearing and are never found, never seen, never heard from
Did
again.
he see like teardrop tattoos? Like what is
We'll
he
get to it,
so
we'll get to
freaked
it, we'll
out
get to it.
about?
And like, it's 1996. There's video cameras. Why isn't this road just videoed?
It's- Great question. It's just in the middle. It's out in the boonies. There's no. It's a.
But also, why is it known for murders and it's just left to
Like, this is where all the murders happen.
And everyone in Cold Lake Falls knows it. Everyone's like, oh yeah, that's Atticus Line. No one drives on Atticus Line. That's where all the murders happen. All right, we'll get to that a little bit more of the folklore in just a minute.
And how are there so many women just walking this road randomly?
Well, so we'll get to that in a little bit too.
Hurry!
This was my.
But the thing is that it's often hitchhikers. So Hunter Beach, which we'll get to, but Hunter Beach is like it's a big beach owned by some rich dude, and he just lets anyone come. It's just like for wanderers. And April actually, she has a lot of this because she was a wanderer, right? She was always going from place to place. She has a lot of experience where she can say, there's no way people would do this. There's no way people would do that. I wouldn't do that. And if I wouldn't do that, other people wouldn't do that because I've been in their position. But that's why the murders keep happening, is because people are just going to Hunter Beach and they're nomads and they're wanderers. And so when they die, oftentimes no one's really looking for them. And so years go by and no one ever hears from them again, right? And so the detective, Quentin and Cal, they take April and Eddie over to a bed and breakfast owned by a lady named Rose Jones. And Rose is obsessed with Princess Diana. And this is 90.
I mean, as she should be.
Yes,
Yeah,
this is
we love
96.
her already.
And she even looks like, she doesn't look like Princess Diana, but she tries to do her hair like Diana. So it has Princess Diana pictures all over. It has just kind of this quirky lady in her
Like
early 50s.
Like some women obsess over like Dolly Parton.
Yeah, it's that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And she talks like this, and she's really ornery, and she's pissed because the officers have someone staying there. And okay, fine. And so she gets Eddie and April all situated, and Eddie and April are going to bed that night. And they're laying there quietly, and April says, Eddie, like, why didn't you want me to mention the truck? Like, why couldn't we do that? And he said, because I saw something when the truck drove by, and I don't know what I saw. And he knows what he saw, but he doesn't know if it's real, because he has a history of hallucinations because of his military experience and stuff. And he says, I just don't know if this can be real. She goes, what did you see? And he said, as the truck drove by, sitting in the truck bed, kind of leaning over the edge, looking at the car, was a girl in the back of this truck, and just staring at us as we took the exit.
So tell him about the truck so you can save the girl. What is he doing?
And so
Who was the girl to him?
he doesn't know, but he says she was dressed in like a big t-shirt and had long hair, and her eyes were dark and sunken, and he said she didn't move. Like, the truck was going so fast and would bump, and she just sat there stone cold in the back of this truck like nothing was even
So
moving.
why don't you say anything to the cops?
And said this, and it was just weird, and didn't know if it was real. So then he was like, I don't know if the truck was real.
April saw the truck too.
And so April says, I saw the truck, it was real. And he's just having a hard time, kind of. Okay. So next morning, they wake up, and the police are there bright and early to question them, and they take them down to the station, and they're doing their old good cop, bad cop, and trying to figure out what's going on. and they say, "Hey, we want to take you out to Atticus Line, and you show us where you picked up Rhonda Jean." They get out there, and Eddie's like, "Yeah, I think it was right around here." And they say, "Hey, Eddie, it's kind of weird. Why are you guys way out here?" "Well, we're on our way to our honeymoon." "Where are you going for your honeymoon?" "This resort on this lake somewhere." "That's completely the other direction. So why are you guys out here?" And Eddie says, "I thought we were going in the right direction." "Well, that's not really a good excuse." And he says, "Dude, call the hotel. Double check. Like, we have a reservation." And Officer Detective Quentin's like, "All I'm saying is that you had no reason to be here. Like, you're completely out of your way." And then April starts to say, "Why? I just woke up when we were here. Like, why did Eddie take the wrong? How
Ooh.
did he turn so far off? Like." And Eddie's whole thing was like, I thought we were going the right way. I thought we were going the right way. And remember, there's no GPS. It's not like it's 96. And so, but April, I mean, they're loyal to each other. She doesn't question it much more. The detectives have to take their car and for evidence and stuff. And so Eddie and April are left without a car, and they're stuck at Rose's place. And they start to build a relationship with Rose, and Rose is telling them the history of the town and history of Atticus Line. For those of you listening this much or this far, Kayla's shushing our baby to sleep. So pay no mind to the shushes in the background if you can hear them. Well, talking with Rose, Rose tells them about Hunter Beach and how that's where all the wanderers go, and that's how all the hitchhikers get killed, and yada yada yada. And they say, "Well, we want to go to Hunter Beach." And she says, "Okay, take Robbie's car." Robbie was her husband, or who's dead. Oh yeah, everyone thinks Rose killed her husband Robbie, which she did not. But it's just kind of easy to blame it on the crazy lady, and he had died while she was digging, like in her garden, and someone had seen a dead body while she was just digging in the day, and they thought she had lost her mind and killed her husband and was burying him in the backyard. She was just doing yard work anyway. But oddly enough, nothing has grown where she was digging. There's just this big flower bed that's just empty. It's just dirt, and there's no flowers growing there or anything. And April makes note of that and says, "This is weird." And I know she says nothing happened, but we don't know who this lady is. Her husband died, and this is
We
where
don't
it
know how or
supposedly
why.
happened,
Yeah.
right? And Rose knows everyone and everything, and just is kind of the gossiper, has every bit of insight you can think of. The history of Atticus Line that they learn from Rose is that there's been murders every couple years, right? Happens there, but it all started with one, and that person had never been identified, never body was never found, and they call her the Lost Girl. And the rumor is, if the Lost Girl sees you, you're gonna die next, right? That Atticus Line is haunted. Don't go to Atticus Line, right? With the Lost Girl, and all of this stuff. So they borrow the car and they drive down to Hunter Beach, and they meet some kids at Hunter Beach or whatever, and they learn that Rhonda Jean had been at Hunter Beach, and that she had left the day before. And they say she was killed. She had been stabbed, and one of the guys is like, "Oh, I should have stopped her. I saw her leaving. She was walking to the bus stop. I should have offered her a ride, but turns out I was the last person to see her alive." And so they learned this bit of information of that. Oh my gosh, Rhonda, she was hitchhiking. She's been killed. Who is killing these hitchhikers? They're getting ready to head back to Cold Lake Falls, and they stop at this grocery store to ask some questions because the teenagers at Hunter Beach had said we had all gone to this like convenience store. So they go to this convenience store and they're asking the checker or the employee, "Have you seen this pic? Have you seen this girl?" Showing pictures of Rhonda, just trying to pick up any leads that they can. So they're kind of curious to figure out who killed Rhonda Jean with this other background of who is the lost girl, who was the first murder back in '76 when this girl went missing. Well, as they're in the convenience store, April hears the beep ding, the bell on the door, and turns around, and no one is there.
What?
And she just kind of thinks, "Oh, that's odd." And so Eddie is talking with the cashier, and she hears the ding again and turns around, and nothing is there. And finally, she hears it a third time, and she says, "It was so distinct that I actually stepped out of the aisle to go see, like someone is there," and sees no one. And at this exact same time, she says she gets the deepest, chillest feeling down her spine that something horrible is about to happen.
Oh no.
And they look out the window at the convenience store, or April does, and says, Eddie. And Eddie rushes around, and at the end of the parking lot is a black truck. The same truck they had seen the night before. Black truck, engine still running, just sitting at the end of the parking lot.
Did they see them?
So Eddie says, and they rush out, and Eddie goes marching towards the truck, saying, hey, who are you? What are you? And the truck just tires spin and vroom, takes off driving. Well, Eddie and April jump into the car, and they start chasing this truck. And they're chasing it and driving down these back roads, and the truck turns off onto this dirt road, and Eddie kind of stops and looks down the road and sees that it's just this. You can't tell if it's a really long driveway or just a dirt road. Looks like a dirt road, and Eddie takes it, and they start driving down. And April the whole time is like, Eddie, what are we doing? We don't know who this is. Why are we following them? And Eddie's like, we're suspects, and that person is the murderer, and we need to figure out what's going on. And they lose sight of the truck because they waited too long, but they're driving up ahead, and they get to this barn. And in front of the barn, the black truck is parked. And so Eddie and April get out of the truck slowly.
Why did they get out?
Their car, I mean.
Why?
They're going to go confront truck person.
Oh my gosh, they're going to die.
So there's like the farmhouse, and there's the barn on the other side of the field, right? And they're chilling. They're looking around the house. No one's in the truck now, so whoever was in the truck has gone into the house. And Eddie is like military, so he's like very like covertly trying to like look. April's kind of looking through a window, and Eddie's looking through another window, or behind her or something. And then April turns around, and behind Eddie, outstanding in the field by the barn, April sees a girl.
Oh no!
And it's the girl who Eddie described from the back of the pickup truck, and she is wearing jean shorts and a long t-shirt and dark brown hair kind of hanging over her face and sunken in eyes, and she's just standing out there. And April has this just pit in her stomach and feels like this horrible, chilling feeling like something bad is going to happen. And she whispers to Eddie, Eddie, she's behind you. And Eddie and he says, I know, I can feel her. And he turns around and sees this girl out in the field. And as Eddie starts to walk out to the field to go say, and he says, hey, and then out of nowhere, the door from the house bursts open, and a guy comes running out, charging at Eddie, and tackles Eddie to the ground, and they start tussling and fighting. But Eddie is...
Why did Eddie say anything? He was trying to be all secret, and then he's like,
hey! And then so Eddie and this guy are fighting, and it's very, very intense in the book. You have no idea who this guy is. Well, Eddie had kind of overpowered him, won the little fight. They had called the police. And this guy who was wrestling, his name is Max Chandler. Max Chandler is just a guy in the town, lives on the outskirts by himself, and they don't know who he is, but Max ends up getting arrested because in the back of the truck they find a backpack that belonged to Rhonda Jean. And so they're questioning Max, and they say, how did you get Rhonda Jean's backpack? And he says, I have no idea. I don't know. I've never seen that backpack before. And they say, where were you last night? And he goes, I can't remember where I was last night. I know I went out to get beer, and I don't remember much. You know, I was tired, and so it's very suspicious. But they find all this evidence of Rhonda Jean in his truck, so he is arrested for the murder of Rhonda Jean.
Because he did it.
So they get back to Rose's house, and they're talking and kind of explaining everything that had happened. And Detective Quentin comes by and says, hey, we've arrested Max. You guys are free to go. Here's your car. I suggest getting out of Cold Lake Falls. We are done here, type of thing. There's like just all this uncertainty and questions about it, like who was that girl? Because at this point, they've still never mentioned that they saw a girl to anyone. They had never really mentioned the truck until now. They had to tell Detective Quentin, we had thought we recognized this truck, so we followed it, and that's how they kind of got to Max Chandler's house. Detective Quentin is still super suspicious
I'm suspicious.
of Eddie and April, and saying like, well, how convenient, you guys just stroll into my town, and here's what you guys, you found all this stuff, right? And so you need to get out of here. And Rose says, yeah, if I were you, I would leave too. So. And so they've returned. The car is just covered in blood and smells awful and that sort of thing. But they get in their car, they pack up, get in their car, they say thank you to Rose, and they start leaving. And as they're leaving, it's starting to pour rain, and the windshield wipers are going really fast. They're trying to get out of town. And as this happens, it's almost like this light is coming up in the road. And April says, Eddie, do you see that? And Eddie says, yes, I see it. She goes, Eddie, stop. Eddie, stop. Eddie, stop. And he won't stop. And he drives through, and it's kind of like this mist. And as he gets through the mist, all of a sudden there is a girl sprinting straight towards the car in the middle of the road with rain hailing. So Eddie slams on his brakes.
So what was the light?
Supernatural stuff, like whatever, like just.
Okay.
Eddie slams on the brakes because there's this girl, and this girl doesn't stop. She just sprints, and she goes and she slams on the car, and the windows were rolled down because the smell of the car was so bad. And this girl, she's covered in rain, and she's muddy, and she's gross, and she has the dark hair and her sunken in eyes. And she grabs April by the arm.
Is it the same girl?
The same girl,
Oh
and she
my
reaches
hell.
through and grabs Eddie,
my
and she just screams, "Help me!
Oh my
Help
gosh.
me!
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
And like is screaming, and they're like, "Oh my gosh! Like what is happening?" And Eddie's flooring it, and the car's not going anywhere, and she's just screaming, "Help me! Help me!" And then
So help her.
finally they break free of this girl in the car.
They leave her? Oh,
In the car.
Poor girl.
The car pulls out and is gone, and they're like, "Holy shit! Like what just happened?" And they're freaking out.
Eddie's in on it. Why didn't he help her?
Well, the thing is about all of this is that it's all been supernatural. So after this thing, Eddie wasn't sure why wasn't she moving in the back of the truck that night, and they realize that girl that had asked for help is the lost girl.
Oh.
So she is a ghost, right? And this is where supernatural stuff starts to come into the book, which is where I slowly start to lose interest because I'm not super into supernatural stuff, but they do a good job. And they realize that that's the lost girl asking for help, and they say, we cannot leave Cold Lake Falls until we help this girl.
No, don't go back.
So they turn around and they go back to Cold Lake Falls, and they go back to Rose's, and they are staying at Rose's again. And they decide that they are not going to leave Cold Lake Falls until they can figure out who killed the lost girl. It's been a cold case for years. No one ever found out. But the lost girl is begging for help, right? Is like asking to help me, kind of set me free type thing. So Eddie and April now feel obliged to stay and help her move on.